Welcome back. You are listening to Nate the Hate on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcast. This episode is dedicated to Shamsa, who gave a very generous donation of $200. Thank you, Shamsa, for your continued support and generosity to the channel. And as a reminder to everyone, if you donate $100 or more, we will dedicate the episode to you. Or you can donate as little as $1, ask a question. We will answer the question at the end of the episode. Joining me today, as always, is my co-host, Modern Vintage Gamer.
Hey, what's going on, Nate? Great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Always a pleasure to have you. And I'm going to start today with a very quick question because I've seen the question appear on my Twitter timeline a couple of times now. But Skitittles wants to know, how cute is the Xbox Series S?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Skitittles, I did release an unboxing video of it recently. It's a pretty nice looking system. I really admire the way it looks. I mean, there's nothing really, there's nothing that stands out about the system other than it's just a white rectangular box, and I think it looks kind of cool. And it's pretty tiny, but there'll definitely be more Series S coverage coming on my channel over the next couple of weeks. So watch my channel for more stuff.
Yes, everyone is encouraged to check out Modern Vintage Gamer's channel. You can find the YouTube link in the description below and check out his Xbox Series S unboxing. It is white, as he said, with a black dot, so it's kind of like Snoopy. Adorable and quiet. No Woodstock, though. No Woodstock. And we'll go into today's topic, which is three-tiered. First, we're going to talk about the introduction of cloud gaming on Nintendo Switch in North America, and we're going to follow that up with what that means for the long-rumored and speculated Nintendo Switch Pro, or the Switch Revision, and how the Switch family could expand in 2021 in an interesting and exciting new way. So let's get right into it with cloud gaming. This week, Nintendo had a Nintendo Direct Partner Showcase, and in it they announced 2 games are going to be coming to the Switch, but only via the cloud. The first game, which is available now on the eShop, is Control from Remedy, and the second game that will be coming out in the unknown distant future is Hitman 3. Now, these aren't the first cloud games to come to the platform. A couple of years ago in Japan, we saw Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Resident Evil 7, but they were only available in Japan. They never expanded into other regions. So these are the first 2 examples of worldwide reach. And I got my hands on Control, and I played a little bit of it. Did you get a chance to play Control at all, MVG?
Yeah, I grabbed it after the Partner Showcase and took a look at it, and I gotta say, Nate, and I know we're going to talk about this, I'm pretty impressed with the technology. When I think about cloud-based gaming, there's always, I guess, perception that it's laggy, that there's a lot of compression artifacts, especially on the Switch, which has questionable Wi-Fi in the first place. Is it really the right system to run something like this? And then, of course, we've got, services like Stadia, which is kind of getting a really hard time because it's not being taken very seriously and it's not getting a lot of the respect that it's trying to get. And I think a lot of people are pretty, I guess, apprehensive about cloud gaming in general because it doesn't seem like it's taken off maybe in the ways that it should. But I guess on the flip side of that, you've got, xCloud, which seems to be doing all the right things, and people are saying really good things about that service. I personally have not used xCloud yet, but I'll check it out at some point. But with that said, this is pretty impressive. I mean, for the Switch to be running a cloud-based game like Control, which is something that is pretty ambitious in of itself because there's a lot of data that you would think needs to be pushed over the wire to your client Switch in the first place. It runs, it runs really well, like almost to the point where you're just playing the game locally on your system. And overall, first impressions are very positive, and I think that Nintendo is onto something with this stuff. What do you think?
Yeah, I got to play Control on the Switch. I played it in handheld mode first. So this was over Wi-Fi, and admittedly, I do have a gigabit connection, so even on Wi-Fi, the signal is quite strong. And I played first time through was with the enhanced graphics mode. So I had no problems with it. I didn't have any, compression or artifacting on the screen. The game ran really without any hint of input delay, and it was quite impressive. And the game has ray tracing, which is a first, I believe, on the Switch. I know Crysis had some form of it, I believe, but the ray tracing and Control was very impressive in this demo. And I then tried performance mode because I figured if it ran well in enhanced graphics mode, then maybe performance mode would be, smoother, because I would imagine the data being transferred over the bit rate and such would be lessened because you're not going to be pushing those high fidelity graphics. And it ran equally as well. And then I tried it docked, still over Wi-Fi, and it still ran beautifully. And it was very surprising to see that it ran this well, because when Resident Evil 7 did hit the Japanese eShop, I downloaded the client because I figured there's still a chance it could run, and I could play it for about 2 seconds before the connection completely dropped.
Yeah.
And the curious thing with cloud-based gaming, especially on the Switch, is, we see a lot of that discussion of the Wi-Fi chip isn't that good. You have people play Smash Brothers and they say, the Wi-Fi fighters are ruining the experience due to lag. And if you can get cloud-based gaming up and running on the Switch to a, fair capacity, it might have potential, but there is one big roadblock, and Remedy's Control is certainly going to be victim to this, and it's pricing. With Control, you only have one option, and you can buy an unlimited pass for $40, which allows you to play the game as much as you want. You can play a demo of it if you download the client, and it's really just a test to see if you can play the game. I believe it's for 5 minutes consistent without any significant connection drops. And then the game allows you to, I believe, make the purchase. So you get to test your connection, make sure you can run. But $40 to me seems a bit too pricey. I think they should offer a multi-tier approach where it's maybe a month for $10, 6 months for $20, unlimited for $40. This way you give the player options, because Control isn't an overly long game here. We're talking maybe let's say 18 to 24 hours depending on your play style and if you go through all the DLC or not. You give me the option for $10 to play for a month, I will probably be satisfied with what you're offering there, because $10 is fairly cheap. I have access to it for the month. I can play it. And then once I'm done with it and I don't want to return, that's fine. And I get the idea these cloud-based games are really probably for people who only have a Switch. You don't have a gaming PC. You don't have an Xbox Series or an Xbox One or a PlayStation 4, and you're likely not buying a PlayStation 5 or an Xbox Series X or S. You just game on the Switch. So this is the only way you can play Control. So I think you have to approach pricing a little more aggressively with the options and not force people to just drop this $40 to own a digital only or a cloud-based game. Because if the market were ready for that approach, Stadia would have more success than what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And a big part of Stadia's shortcomings are from the idea of, you want me to give you $60 for a game I don't actually have ownership of, and it's a game that could come off the servers at any time, and I'm reliant on my internet connection at any given point. And the Switch is a portable device, so having to use Wi-Fi to play the game already limits the overall appeal of the service in and of itself. Like, yes, we're at the advent of 5G. 5G is more than capable of, playing a game on your Switch that's cloud-based, but not everyone has a 5G phone. I certainly wouldn't trust my 4G connection and linking it to my Switch to play something like Control at a consistent, some sort of consistency from performance.
Yeah.
In-home Wi-Fi, yes. So if they can address the pricing, they may have something here.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of question marks.
I agree with what you say. I mean, there's definitely shades of Stadia when it comes to the pricing model. It's very difficult. It's very difficult to price these games. Like, I think it must be the hardest job in the world to try to figure out how to price cloud-based games, unless you put them all on a subscription service. Like, $40 is expensive. I mean, in another way, you're getting a really good game and all of its DLC, and you're getting, the best version of the game running on a Switch for $40. So is that really a bad deal? But I guess the problem with this is, just like Stadia, is that along comes Project xCloud by Microsoft, and if they put control on xCloud and their price is a lot more competitive, then it's something that Nintendo ultimately have made a mistake on, and I think they have to, and maybe they will. I mean, this is the first of hopefully more cloud-based games to come. Maybe they will bundle all these together and sell them, or maybe add another tier on to the Nintendo Switch Online subscription, where if you want, cloud gaming, then add an extra couple of dollars a month and you get access to those games and play them anytime you want. I mean, that would be a really smart approach, but in order to do that, they need to build up that library first. So, you got that first game out, so how do you price it? And I think ultimately it's very difficult, because even if you put it at $10, which, $10 is a good price to pay, even for a license, we'll say, to play a cloud-based game anytime you want, I think that's a more than reasonable price. Eventually, it's going to get to a point where it's like, why am I paying $10 a pop for these cloud-based games? I mean, I do wonder where this goes. And look, I want Nintendo to be encouraged by this. Like, I think the tech is very good, and it actually surprised me. I thought the experience may be a little more jittery and a little bit more laggy overall, but honestly, Nate, I couldn't tell the difference. I mean, I haven't side by sided it with just a local version of the game. I do have the game on the PlayStation 4, but when I was moving the controller around, everything just felt normal to me. It didn't feel like there was an extra frames of delay in there. And great tech. Now it's all up to Microsoft. Sorry, it's all up to Nintendo to market this thing, I think, is the key thing here.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I mean, like, the $10 in my mind would be kind of like a rental.
Yeah,
like, you're renting the game for the month. It costs $10. Just to entice that buyer a little more. And it kind of comes down to the idea of, we're at $40. If nobody's biting and I offer you these multi-tier options, even if we have, 1,000 people at $10 is better than nobody at $40.
Right.
At least it's some sort of revenue coming in. And that's kind of how I view these cloud-based games, at least on the Switch right now, is that you're just looking to generate some sort of revenue stream. You're not using this to gauge necessarily, is there an audience for a game like Control? If you're, 505 games, you're just kind of viewing it as, let's see how cloud-based gaming does on a platform like Switch.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll bring cloud-based gaming to other platforms, but right now the Switch is kind of the platform we want to test this out on, and it's probably multifaceted even in that. When I look at the games that have so far been introduced to this cloud-based service, even if I just look at the Japanese games that have been out with Assassin's Creed, Resident Evil 7, and now Control, and eventually Hitman 3, all of them are fairly demanding games. These are games that would not run on the Switch, at least not natively, without
right.
severe compromises to the point where they may not even be recognizable to their original form.
Yeah.
So now if I'm Capcom or Remedy or any company, and I say, I really want to bring the game to Switch. You have a huge user base. They're very active. Software is selling well. But I cannot port my latest release natively to your platform. This is now a viable option. I use cloud to bring the game to the platform that otherwise wouldn't have it. And I think a debate that's going to be ongoing with some fans, probably from this point, maybe even into next year, is what's better? Having a cloud version of Control on the Switch or having no version?
That's an interesting point, Nate. I mean, what about like Doom Eternal, right? I mean, that game has been in development for a long time. We didn't hear anything about it at the last partner showcase, and I was kind of expecting to hear some update. I know the last communication we heard was, it's coming soon, and that's what we have to believe, that there may be some announcement on regarding that game. I think it's probably going to get pushed to next year. It's probably not going to happen this year, which is fine. But given the amount of time that game has been in development for the Switch, do you think maybe in hindsight, what would have been better is to come up with a cloud version of this game instead? Because it's something, I'm not saying they could have spun it up very quickly, but it's something that would already be up and running by now. And do you think it comes to a point where you've spent so much time trying to optimize or get a game ready for the Switch, and is it really something that you should just consider just throwing onto the cloud service instead?
That's a tough question to really gauge, because I would imagine if I'm a company like Bethesda, I probably have looked at the success of Doom 2016 on the Switch and said, we sold this many, copies. I believe the game is still full priced on Switch. And, we know what we're selling. We know what we sold. So we have a general idea of what we can expect performance-wise when Doom Eternal does eventually drop on the system. And they probably know we can make a lot of money with a $60 version. We know we might sell 1 million copies versus that uncertainty of a cloud version. Yes, the cloud version from an investment standpoint to actually get the game on Switch is probably virtually nothing.
Yeah.
You're using a PC build of the game. You're putting it onto the server, which I believe is Ubitus, I think is the company who does this.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then you charge $40. So the overhead is incredibly low, but I think if you've already had success on the platform with a previous version or the previous, the predecessor, you know what you're going to make and you know how much to invest in the outsourcing company to handle the port. So you've already weighed all those pros and cons, and you came to that decision of the system can run that engine. We can get the game up and running at a workable and a well-represented version of the game. It's not a version we're embarrassed about.
Yeah.
So let's do a native port. Whereas Control ran iffy on base Xbox One and PlayStation 4.
It really did. It had a lot of performance issues, early on, which I think they've fixed since then. But yeah, you're right. It definitely had its quirks.
So you look at that and say, they've probably tested bringing Control natively to Switch. I'm sure Capcom tried to natively bring Resident Evil 7 when they were getting the RE engine up and running on the platform for Monster Hunter Rise. I mean, these companies do explore and experiment with their games to say, can we get it up and running on that platform? And sometimes the case is it's running, but the resolution is lower than we want, or the performance isn't at what we want. So our only option is we either release a very compromised version or we don't do it at all. And now if the option is, let's try the cloud version, we can have a well-rounded and represented version of our game, and it's on that platform that has that huge user base. So let's give that a try. Mm-hmm. And I mean, if that's really the option that a publisher has to weigh, I guess if the game natively cannot work, cloud is the decent option. But I don't foresee this leading to any cases of, do we really want to put in the effort to port this game to Switch?
Yeah.
Let's just go the easy way out. I think the companies will still put their best foot forward and say, if we can natively do it, let's do it. It's only going to be those select cases that it's not possible.
Right.
The hardware is limited. Let's go cloud. And as we brought up, the pricing is going to be an issue. And if they can circumvent that and they can find a new alternative to pricing and offer those options, and that way they bring in money, you might see more publishers where the games didn't work. Let's just go crazy and say Square says, let's bring Final Fantasy VII Remake to Switch via the cloud. Cloud on cloud.
Yeah. I love it. Cloud on cloud edition.
Yeah. Well, let's do that. Kingdom Hearts 3. We've already had Square come out and say, we'd like to bring some of these Kingdom Hearts games over, but it's just not possible.
Yeah.
Let's do a cloud edition. The cloud versions, they're not expecting to have millions of sales of these passes. They're just going to sit there and say, if we can get a few thousand people interested in this, as long as we have revenue coming in, we're happy with that. It means there is interest for our games on this platform. and people are willing to embrace this delivery system. And I think the delivery system itself and the technology behind it is probably the most interesting aspect of it, because it is an interesting avenue for companies to explore.
What about another angle? This is a little out there, but I'm going to throw this to you. So there's two things I want to say. There's two scenarios. The first one is when you go to E3, you're standing in line literally for hours, for a chance to play the next first-party Nintendo game, right?
Yep.
What if, and look, one of the reasons why companies don't put demos up on like the eShop around E3 time is because, they want to control this a lot better, right? Like, it's very difficult just to drop a E3 build of something up there because the build may be a little buggy, and they definitely want to control, the gameplay experience, the user experience, and get you through the demo and then get you on your way. What if they use a cloud service to offer up these demos at these trade shows, so you don't have to sit in line? You still get that controlled, curated experience because, you don't actually have any access to any of the code at all. And then once you're done, then you kind of move on. And the other scenario is, what about if Nintendo, to, I guess, combat leaks? We saw Pokemon get leaked last year, and it was something that Nintendo was not very happy about. Obviously, they went after some people with, cease and desist and legal threats and whatnot, and basically the game was completely leaked before it had come out. Same thing with some other games that got leaked as well. Nintendo obviously is no stranger to that. What about to control leaks, that any reviewer or any media that is reviewing the game before the game goes to retail is available on the cloud only, so they don't get a review code to download it. They get that controlled, curated experience on the cloud. I know I'm like throwing these curveballs out there, but what do you think about those two scenarios?
For demos, even outside of trade shows, I could see it being a viable secondary option. I understand the idea, especially for security, because as soon as you drop a demo, it happened with Age of Calamity demo.
Yep.
People data mine it, and you find out, starting roster, characters, etc. in it. And if you did do it during the cloud, you're not going to get that data mining.
Right.
But it just runs into the problem of that demo would then only be available to those with a good internet connection. So you limit the appeal.
Yeah.
And I guess to that point would also go to reviewers. You have a bad internet connection, you can't review the game. Or if your internet is unstable, you might misunderstand that the game's performance isn't poor. It's your internet that's causing these problems. And with COVID, I know some media events have been conducted over Zoom, or they have they kind of do demos in Zoom where you are playing essentially like through Stadia,
right,
to get an understanding of how the game plays and everything. So you could do that, I guess, if they would really have to nail the infrastructure for it. But I would be open to the idea of cloud demos for the mass consumer, just as a secondary option. Like maybe that's the first round, and then like a couple of weeks later comes the native eShop file-based demo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But like, as much as people hate it, cloud gaming is a direction the industry is moving in. It may take years to get there. The market is not quick to embrace this. This is not something that they're really willing to just leap into, because there is the ownership issue. There is the idea of, I don't actually own anything. I just have the license for a game, which people can make the argument, yeah, you have a disc for a game. All that grants you is a license because you put it into the system. It then gets a digital license. It goes through all this whole process. So it's really not that different, except you have the box and you have the disc, and it makes you feel like you own something that you can always access. Right now, we don't know about cloud stuff. Can I access, if I bought Control on my Switch today, can I access it in 3 years?
I doubt it.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the eShop is still around, I guess you can, but Yeah, I mean, eventually it's going to go away.
If Vitus is no longer functioning, then the server doesn't exist.
That is true too. It's just one of those things that comes with it. And look, it's funny you say that, because if I was blindfolded and you just boot up to the intro screen there, and I just press start and I started playing the game, I couldn't tell you if it was running on the cloud or if it was running on the Switch locally. I mean, the experience is that good. And that's where it gets interesting, because for the average person, they don't necessarily care where they're playing it. If the experience is still good either way, then I think, the job is done. But where it gets interesting is that, look, this is Control, right? This is not typically a game that would live on the Nintendo Switch in the first place. I think it's one of those games where it's been around for a while. It's a good game. It was reviewed well, but it also is a very niche style of game. And I think for a cloud-based game, it's the perfect solution. It's the perfect game for it, because it has those features that can really show off what cloud gaming is all about. But, if you just had a native port on the Switch and you had it on the eShop for $40, I don't know if it necessarily would be the right game, because I think it's overpriced either way. And it just goes back to, how do you price these games? How do you market these games to a wider audience,
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, where had the game released natively $40 on the Switch, I don't know what the selling potential would really be, because it would come down to, how does the game look? How does the game perform? And with a game like Control, I would wager it probably wouldn't have looked and ran all that well natively on Switch.
Yeah.
The cloud version alleviates those concerns, but it still has the big obstacle in a way, and that is stable internet connection. So it still has that limiting factor. And that's where the pricing really is something that they just have to nail.
Yeah.
If you want people to really embrace and go this route for your games on Switch, because you can't bring them over natively and you can only do cloud, you have to give us those pricing options. You have to give us a way to really play the games where it's not a full $40 ownership idea, where it is maybe just a rental, or maybe, as you said, you attach it to Nintendo Switch Online.
Yep.
Where I guess Nintendo would have to step forward and say, hey, Capcom, Remedy, all your other publishers or developers who are thinking of doing cloud-based games, we want to bring you in and offer you as part of Nintendo Switch Online, because we're raising the price $30 a year. And you say, okay, sweet. Obviously, Nintendo would have to give them, a piece of action there.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I did see is that a lot of discussion sprung up of, because we're seeing cloud-based gaming come to Switch, even though limited, does this open up the idea of maybe Nintendo is willing to sit down and have the conversation with Microsoft of bringing xCloud to Switch?
Ooh.
And
that's another episode I think we could get into.
Yeah. I mean, the surface level answer is, I believe these conversations have place and are ongoing. The key issue is the difference between the two ideas is Control is a single game. Nintendo can kind of control that. xCloud is a vast service where Microsoft curates the software on it, and Nintendo would probably want a little more power over the games that are on that service.
Right.
And that may not be something Microsoft is willing to compromise on. And that would probably be where the friction is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that.
But, I mean, cloud gaming on the Switch, it's intriguing. It's nothing new. As I said, we saw it in Japan a couple of years ago. This is just the first time we've seen it in the Western markets. And I am impressed with the technology. I'm impressed with how it ran. And we've seen the rumors that maybe Capcom is going to bring Resident Evil 3 Remake to the service.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, if you can't play Resident Evil 3 any other way and you have good internet and you want to play it on Switch, that may be coming your way and maybe it's a viable option for you. I just hope there's better pricing structure in place, because $40 or $60 is a lot of money for basically a unlimited rental pass. Give us those options. I think people would be more willing to embrace the idea. I mean, I know for a month for $10, I would rent the game via the cloud without hesitation. I'm sure others would as well. And even a low revenue stream is better than no revenue stream.
I mean, I beat Resident Evil 3 Remake in 7 hours, and trust me, I was not speed running that game. I know people that can beat it in less than 2 hours. So,
you'd only need a weekend pass.
Yeah, I mean,
$250.
If you charge $40 for that game, that is completely missing the window, completely missing the boat on what you're trying to do there. But I did want to say, Nate, is the cloud-based gaming, and I know this is going to segue into the next topic, is the cloud-based gaming on the Nintendo Switch a sign of things to come? Is it a stopgap for what's coming next year with new Switch models?
I'd say no. No, in a word, no. I don't think we can look to cloud-based gaming as to mean anything to do with the revision of 2021. And I know a lot of people are trying to connect the two, saying, well, look, controls on the cloud for Switch, that means a native version will come to the revision or the Switch Pro in 2021. And I don't think we can link those two together right now.
What about Resident Evil, though? I mean, we heard rumors that the RE engine is running on the Switch now, and Monster Hunter is coming. But do you think that falls into the same bucket as well?
I do, because we have to remember that the RE engine for Monster Hunter Rise is a modified RE engine.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not exactly the same as the RE engine being used for Resident Evil 2 Remake and Resident Evil 3 Remake. So there's some modification. We don't know what it is. Maybe it's, like RE engine Lite, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
It means you could port those games over. It's just a question of what were the sacrifices and what were the compromises made? Was it resolution? Was it performance? Is it just to a point where even Capcom looked at it and said, we could release it, but it's just not up to our standard of quality? And that'd be a question that, unless we're actually sitting in there and watching these test demos take place, we don't know. And it's, it's complex.
Yeah.
But we're anticipating the Switch revision to be a power boost of some sort. We don't know the exact range. Maybe it's 20% in CPU, RAM. We don't know exactly how far the system is going to get, enhancements. But I don't think it's going to be enough that you're also going to get these games as native ports, because if I'm Nintendo, the important thing is I still have a base of 70 million people with the current Switch. If you want to bring over a game like Resident Evil 2, we'll say, I don't want you to alienate them.
Right.
And people say, well, that's why you have the cloud version. And as we've discussed, the cloud version is still held back by internet connection. So you're going to release a physical game that, only a few million people can play who bought the Pro, and you're going to abandon the huge base. The base is the reason you're bringing these games over, is that 60 million people, 70 million people. It's not for the 5 million new Pro buyers.
What's more important, though, held back by internet or held back by hardware? You know what I'm saying? Would you rather have a really nice looking cloud version that is running max settings somewhere else on a PC? Mm-hmm. Or would you have a local native Switch version that's running, we'll say, medium to medium high settings with significant post-processing reductions?
I guess it would come down to the game in that case. If you as the developer, if you look at that version and say, this loses a lot of that atmosphere and quality that we wanted to deliver with the game, then I don't want to go with the latter. But it seems like it'd probably be a case-by-case basis of really what you're trying to convey with, the game you're releasing. And, it's definitely a complex matter. I don't think we can view this Pro of 2021 as the solution to the third-party problem on Switch. It's not going to come in and all of a sudden solve all those problems, where every developer who's ever come out and said, hey, we'd like to bring the game over to Switch, but, the system just isn't powerful enough. This revision isn't just going to be that elixir that makes all these dreams come true. I still think Nintendo's core vision is whatever is going to run on next year's revision has to also run on the Switch Lite and the current Switch Hybrid. Because that's the thing, we still have the Switch Lite. And I understand it's selling, but it hasn't been the huge blockbuster seller that maybe Nintendo had envisioned. It still is second in sales compared to the hybrid. The hybrid is the flagship lead model. And, if you still have that Lite you need to develop for, you're not going to abandon it.
Right.
It's just, it's bad business. And, I want to see how they truly do approach software with the Pro, because if it is, as we've kind of talked about in the past, just a system that has improved CPU, has the improved GPU, has 4K functionality of some sort, be it through DLSS or just 4K upscale, none of it is enough to make the current Switch obsolete. And that is what I maintain. The Switch revision of 2021 is not going to make the current models obsolete. It's just going to essentially replace the current hybrid model with a better version. The Lite will remain, and that's just happens to be the new family of the Switch at that time. It's very similar to what we saw with the new 3DS. It just replaced the 3DS.
Yeah.
You just kind of forget that system exists. It didn't take away what happened with those 3DSs. Like, the games, 99% of the games were still compatible.
Yep.
And that's what I anticipate here. It's not a start of a new generation. It's not a replacement.
Right. Yeah, I agree, Nate. I mean, it's the new Nintendo Switch. It takes the same types of steps Nintendo did with the 3DS and applies it here. I totally agree. What I want to see with the revision or the Pro, whatever we call it, I want to see a bigger screen, though, because one of the things about the Lite for me that I feel like is not aging very well, and the Lite's only been around for not very long, is that the screen is super tiny. Like, I've been playing a lot of games on the Lite. I mean, the Lite is my portable system of choice. My regular Switch is mostly docked most of the time, so there's that. But, the Lite, like, I was playing Age of Calamity on it, and reading the font is very, very difficult. I know, look, I have, my eyesight isn't great in the first place, but, the font is super tiny. And I know when Fire Emblem came out last year, it was a similar thing. It just seems like these games just don't scale, and scale is probably not the right word, but they don't reduce in size, on the Lite probably the way that they should. And I definitely want to see whatever comes next for the Switch. I want to see a bigger screen. Like, I think the one on the regular Switch is fine, but I think it's time just to expand the size a little bit more and get us something that's a little more 2021, we'll say, as opposed to smaller, because smaller used to be better a couple of years ago, but smaller is not better anymore. I think, hey, look at the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. I mean, we don't care about small and compact systems anymore. We want big behemoth, hardware. So Nintendo, give us something a little bit bigger, screen wise. I think would be really, really appreciated.
Yeah, I'm sure most people would like a Switch XL type of thing, and we've seen them do that with the DS line and even the 3DS. I think they had a bigger model with the screen. I stopped with the new 3DS. I didn't continue upgrading every time they came out with a new iteration.
Yeah,
and like even the Switch right now, depending on what the revision is, the 2021, for the Pro, depending on what it offers, I may not upgrade. I might just stay with the hybrid Switch hybrid Switch that I have right now, because if all the games are compatible, I'm okay with the performance I see generally from the games. And one thing that has crossed my mind is, I saw people post this on Twitter as a question to me a few times. It's that we are moving into a new generation with the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. And now we're seeing the cloud-based games come to Switch that we've deemed not feasible to run on Switch hardware. So that case is only going to expand with the arrival of PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X, especially from third parties, as they pivot towards these new super-powered machines. They're going to start making games tailored specifically for what those systems, have.
Yeah.
And the Switch has already kind of struggled to get some current gen ports. It's gotten more than some people may have anticipated. I mean, Doom Eternal, Witcher 3, and a handful of others. But maybe the Switch Pro, as we said, it's likely not going to alleviate the power differential in any significant way. Would you bring third-party games to the cloud service that are releasing on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X that you couldn't natively bring to the Switch? Or do you just kind of say, hey, Nintendo, when you bring out your successor, we'll give you a late port?
I wouldn't be against bringing them to the cloud service in general. I think it's a very compelling reason to do so. Let's use Cyberpunk as an example. Let's say Cyberpunk, that's coming to Stadia, but let's say that it was announced for the Nintendo Switch on the cloud service that they have. I'd be more than okay with that. I think ultimately, as we mentioned, it just goes back to the pricing of these things, and I think that's where it gets interesting because, are you going to charge $60 for the privilege to play that game on the Switch? No one's going to spend the money on to play the Switch version of that game when you can just get the fully ray traced PC version or the PS5 version when that ultimately comes out as well. I think that's where it gets interesting. But I'd like to see Nintendo, start utilizing the cloud service to bring some of these games across to the Switch. But I am also interested in your take on that as well, because in another way, does that kind of, I don't want to say ruin the Switch experience, because it is very unique in so many ways, because it doesn't have everything on there, but it also has a lot of first-party games that obviously are exclusive to that system. So there's that kind of romance and mystique about Nintendo systems. Are you kind of starting to just open the floodgates a little bit and just kind of throw third-party games on the system in the cloud capacity? And does that kind of dilute the experience of the Switch as a unique handheld, and just make it another, I'll say, generic handheld system that can pretty much play anything?
Man.
I know I'm getting very philosophical here with this stuff, but Nintendo's sold so many systems and made so much money over the years with this product, and I think they need to be very careful about how they position themselves as a game system. I want them to use the cloud, but I guess what I'm saying is I want them to use it when it makes sense. I don't want to see FIFA or Madden on there. You know what I mean? Like, even the ones we already have are horrible. But you know what I'm saying? We just don't want like this mass influx of these games, because I think that would ruin the Switch experience for me,
Yeah. If Nintendo wants to be aggressive with cloud as a viable option to third-party publishers, then I think they do have to have some sort of regulation in place. And it would still kind of come back to the idea of, if you guys can natively do this, bring it to our system natively. We have an active base. They love buying software. You'll probably get your return on investment plus some without issue. We can't promise that if you do a cloud version.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do the cloud version, you really have to weigh those pros and cons. We urge you to do native if possible, but in those games that have no possible way of working, try it. Try the cloud release. What we can promise you is that it's going to get placement on our eShop. You are going to get eyes on it, and it just comes down to you, as we've kind of, iterated a few times now. You guys price it right as the publisher, and you might find an audience on us. We can't promise huge success with the cloud, but we can promise people are going to be aware of it, and you're going to stand out because you're going to be this high demanding game. Like, I'll just use Final Fantasy VII Remake as the example again. You're Final Fantasy VII, you're the remake. You're a game that Switch owners would love to play on the go, or just lounging in bed at night.
Yeah.
Price it right. We guarantee you people are going to at least give the demo a run, and maybe you get someone invested if you price it low enough.
Yeah.
But it's all up to you publishers to price it in a compelling way to get people get people interested in investing in you. Right. We can't do that. If you guys can't price it competitively and you can't bring it to any other way, then, that's your choice. But definitely favor native port first, cloud as just we want to get something on the Switch, we just can't do it. And this is how we're going to have to, this is our only outlet for doing so.
Yeah.
It should kind of be that last resort of, we love your hardware, we love that base. The only way we can bring it is cloud, and Nintendo should say, okay, we'll support that.
Do you think Phil Spencer's talking to Nintendo now about bringing the Halo Master Chief Collection to the Switch via the cloud? That'd be a pretty big announcement.
It would be a big announcement, but based on Phil's recent interview answers, it sounds like he really wants Xbox Live and Game Pass in full on a platform, and that's where, if Nintendo's willing to play ball, it seems like Microsoft is ready and willing to go. It's just, hey, Nintendo,
yeah,
come join us, and we'll give you this vast bounty of software. We just want a little more control than you're willing to give us, and Nintendo just doesn't seem willing to budge right now. But hey, I'm sure these discussions are going on every week, and maybe one day we see some fruits of labor, sprout from that tree of discussion. But
yeah,
cloud and the Switch is a very interesting topic, and it does give Nintendo a little wiggle room to gain access to third-party games that they otherwise would not have at all. And it's really just a question of, is the audience going to embrace this ideology or not? And right now, the jury's out on that. And we'll find out in the coming months, especially, when Hitman 3 comes around. Maybe people are a little more willing to dive into cloud-based purchases. I mean, 10 years ago, hell, even 5 years ago, digital wasn't the primary means of game purchasing. And now it's huge. So we might still just be in the genesis of cloud-based purchasing, and maybe in 5-10 years it becomes the norm. We don't know yet.
Yeah, it's very likely that we'll see more of this coming up. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's a good addition, or something that complements the existing marketplace very well. And yeah, Final Fantasy VII, I mean, that would be a great choice. I know we're kind of fanboying a little bit on that one, but that would be a really good choice to see running on the Switch via the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good complementary service for Nintendo to have. It's just to be able to say, we have Hitman 3, we have Control, and it's just be able to say we have these games, as opposed to we don't have them at all. And it really it comes down to that publisher and pricing. And, the Switch Pro isn't going to fix these problems. It's not also going to make these games come natively to the platform.
Yeah.
It's a good step for Nintendo, especially moving into the future, that maybe get a better Wi-Fi chip in their system.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask, so speaking of that, what are they going to price this Switch revision at? Is it going to be $299 and they're going to drop the price of the current one?
I'd say $299. $299 is the maximum they can go. You can't come out with the Switch revision next year, price it at even $349. It's $50 higher than Xbox Series S, a true next gen system. You don't want that type of narrative being spun that Nintendo is still offering the current gen at a higher price than a next gen system, no matter how limited the Series S is compared to the X or PlayStation 5. It's still the introduction to next gen. So Nintendo has to come in at $299, and I think you position it as a full-on replacement of the current hybrid Switch, and you just phase those out over a period of time, or once production starts on the revision, you cease production of the current hybrid, and maybe by the time it launches, you've kind of already exhausted the stock you had of the current Switch. So come launch of the revision, you can't even find the old model anymore.
Right.
So then, whenever it is introduced, we've speculated maybe it's March. It could be later in the year when Breath of the Wild 2 hits. It's really anyone's guess right now. Nintendo hasn't given us any guidance as to when we are in or could anticipate the revision. The only thing we have about the Switch Pro that came out this week was that it appears Nintendo has gone to Innolux and has investigated the idea of having, I believe, is it mini or micro LED?
I think it's mini. I think it's mini. Yeah.
I think it's mini LED screens, which it's lower energy, it has better contrast, and I believe it could even offer HDR.
Yeah.
So if we remember way back when the initial batch of rumors was Nintendo was looking for a better screen, here it is.
Yep.
This would be a significant upgrade for the screen, and that obviously only comes with a hybrid model. And right now, the weird thing with the talk is if they're just looking into the screen provider now, it seems a little rough if you're planning on launching a system in 5 months. This should have already been finalized because you'd probably be in production in about 2 months if you were launching in March.
Yeah, you'd think so.
You would.
Maybe the dates are, just because we heard about them now doesn't necessarily mean, that's when things have begun.
True.
This stuff could have been in the works for a little longer than that.
That is true. I mean,
or on the flip side, these systems, I mean, we're saying, we're speculating March because that's when it's the 4th anniversary, but it could be more of a holiday thing, right?
It could be a holiday thing. It could be even late, summer. They could do that Zelda thing where, every time they've launched a revision, they've always seemed to have a Zelda ready for it. So maybe it's Breath of the Wild 2, maybe it's Skyward Sword HD, maybe it's a Zelda collection. In 2021, that will launch the Switch revision. We don't know. March has been the long rumored and anticipated because it is the anniversary of the Switch release. We also have Monster Hunter, which typically has a hardware bundle, and it does not have one announced yet.
That's right.
So it's kind of like, well, are you launching the revision? Because it did launch the new 3DS.
Yeah.
So there is that possibility that that's what's going to happen again. We don't know if history will repeat itself or not. But pricing-wise, $299. Really don't know about launch window just yet. And even with the new information that comes out, it still doesn't really narrow in any expectation. Just 2021. Nintendo does have their fiscal report coming up. I believe it is next Friday or next Thursday. If maybe they give us some guidance then about a Switch Pro release window. I'm anticipating they do not. I don't think you would want to announce that, especially not before the holidays. You don't want to limit sales potential because the Switch is selling like hotcakes right now. And why would you want to hurt your own momentum by announcing a revision?
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. With that said, I have a question for you. So next generation systems are coming out in the next few weeks. When does Nintendo decide that it's time for a new generation of system? Eventually the Switch is going to feel a little out of date as far as, there's no fast loading. There's features that people are expecting or people are used to on the Xbox Series X and the PS5. When do you think, how many more years do you think is left in the Switch before we see another generation? Do you think it's another 4 years, or do you think maybe it's reduced a little bit?
Definitely less than 4 years, depending on what we actually get out of the revision itself in terms of performance and new features. I'm anticipating that Nintendo probably has the Switch successor lined up for early 2023.
Yeah, I think that's a good estimation. I think my worry is that developers are going to get to a point where it becomes more of a liability to port stuff to the Switch after a certain amount of time has passed. Maybe that's a little bit naive of me to say that right now, but I think at some point, maybe the revision of the Switch will alleviate some of those concerns in some fashion. But eventually we're going to get to a stage where, these ports to the Switch are going to feel like, it's a budget and a money and a time commitment that maybe these studios are just not thinking about doing, and I'm talking about third parties, of course. So hopefully Nintendo is aware of that. And look, I'd like to think they're already thinking about what's next for the Switch generation,
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're already well underway of development of their next generation system. I'm sure they're working very close with NVIDIA about, any technology that they're currently developing that is going to be suitable for a Switch form factor. And to your point, for like third party, I think where the Switch can gain a little longevity to make it to like 2023 is going to be from the Japanese studios.
Yeah.
Japan is always very reluctant to adopt a new generation. They want to stay in the current gen really as long as they can. They want to maximize those profits. They're finally familiar with the hardware. And the Switch is the leading platform in Japan. It's done very well for studios out there. And, you know, obviously Square Enix already has their big game coming to PlayStation 5 with Final Fantasy 16. But they still make those smaller games, like Bravely Default 2.
Yep.
Octopath Traveler type of games. And that's where the Switch is just prime to take advantage of those type of releases. Or even Atlas, who has suddenly found a little bit of love for Nintendo and the Switch. Atlas is notorious for being slow to coming to the next generation of consoles. And I can't imagine they're in any rush to leap to PlayStation 5. So if the Switch is there for them, and they can get another 2 years out of the Switch and making games, you know, like Shin Megami Tensei or Persona, those type of games, and they can just use the Switch as that lead platform, they will. And that might be what helps them. You're going to get Sega, those type of studios. Western-wise, I mean, let's be real. EA is only just now bringing decent support to the Switch.
Mm-hmm.
Ubisoft, no, they've brought some quality games. They had Mario Rabbids, big success. But otherwise, they were a lot of ports.
Yep.
Like the Assassin's Creed games from last gen. So it's not like they were these huge contributors. And that's where the Switch isn't, or the Switch and potentially the Switch successor, you're not losing all that much from Western studios. You never had the support to begin with.
Right.
I mean, Bethesda was probably the biggest new Western supporter. And come this time next year, they're going to be under Microsoft's control. So
yep.
we can't even say like, oh, well, you know, Bethesda was a big supporter. Yes, they were. And Microsoft now own them by this time next year. So we don't know what type of support could still be there. Indies could carry the Switch till 2023.
No doubt. Yeah. I mean, I think that's definitely a huge part of you know, the landscape that makes up that system. We just saw that with the partner showcases. I mean, there was a lot of emphasis put on that this year, and I think that will continue going forward, no doubt.
And I mean, Nintendo's first party output is always strong. And 2021, as we talked about in the previous episode, is probably going to be an incredibly strong year from Nintendo in terms of output. And we don't know of maybe some games that were planned for 2021 may have gotten pushed to 2022 due to COVID or development delays. I mean, we're still waiting on Metroid Prime 4.
Yeah, that old
Hopefully
chestnut.
It's on Switch. And that's where, I think Nintendo can bide their time even with the genesis of next generation hitting in just a couple of weeks, because Xbox isn't really going to hit their stride until late 2021, early 2022. Sony will be a little more ahead of that race, but Nintendo continues to go to the beat of their own drum. They don't really view those two as their main competition. Nintendo is their own competitor.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think that'll continue.
Yep.
Now, an interesting thing that did come out in recent days was everyone's favorite video game analyst, Michael Pachter.
Oh, God.
Came out with an obscure statement that made absolutely no sense whatsoever, where he said that Nintendo should ditch the hybrid Nintendo Switch, or Nintendo should ditch the Switch hybrid and just have a Lite. And he said Nintendo won't do that because they're not that smart. And the Lite isn't the lead selling hardware for Nintendo. It's the hybrid. And I don't know if Pachter just doesn't understand the appeal of the hybrid, or he misspoke, or he just misreached the market.
Who's giving Pachter a platform in the first place? That's my question.
I don't know. His analyst is no longer really valuable to the gaming community. He comes up with these weird opinions that no one seems to agree with anymore. So he's kind of just a hotbed for hot takes that everyone says, what? But he did bring up an interesting point with the statement. And that point is the Nintendo Switch family of hardware. Now, the Switch was introduced to us in 2017. Fast forward to 2019, Nintendo introduces us to the Switch Lite. We're now moving into 2021. We are anticipating a revision similar to what we kind of saw in 2019. We saw a slight revision that improved the battery life. And what if Nintendo adds another member to the Switch family in 2021? And what I'm thinking, and I put this on Twitter, is what if Nintendo introduces a dock-only Switch?
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, right? Yeah. And it's definitely a possibility, you know? Like,
I think it fits Nintendo's historic pattern.
Yep.
We're talking, like, we know the Switch revision is supposed to have 4K capabilities of some sort. The R&D is done. Take the internals of that, put it into a box, remove the screen, remove the Joy-Con. Boom.
Yeah.
You have your little 4K Switch that you can only play on your TV, and you can bring it down to a price below that of the Switch Lite.
Yeah.
That is your cheap entry model.
Yeah, and you're not kind of cannibalizing your current existing Switch, you know, library. I mean, even with a new Nintendo Switch, you wouldn't be doing that, but it would just add a little bit of, I don't want to say confusion in there, because I mean, if they market it correctly, which they will, I don't think, you know, most people will know any different, but it just makes it's very clear about what you're going to buy versus, hey, this is a new Nintendo Switch, which costs exactly the same price as the current model because we're phasing out the current model type of thing. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some appeal there with what's being said, and you are kind of rounding out the suite with a, you know, a handheld only, a hybrid, and a dockable only. There's definitely some appeal there, and some things to really think about that make something like that a possibility going into next year for sure. But if it was me, you know, speculating, I still think it's the new Nintendo Switch with the which it's just, you know, replaces the existing model, as we know.
Yeah, I mean, I could see them going this 3-tier approach of, you have the hybrid as their flagship model, $299, offers you the best of both worlds. You have the Lite, portable only, and then you just have that stationary Switch, which will have the internals of the revision. So you have your 4K TV. Now the games look crisper and clearer on your TV, unlike the current Switch. And you could price it so affordable that, you know, it doesn't have to sell tens of millions of units. It's really just for those people who just want a Nintendo system. They don't want to have that worry of, well, I bought the Switch, I have kids, they took it out of the dock, they dropped it, it broke.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my box.
Yeah.
And it could be the size of an Xbox Series S.
Yep.
It doesn't even have to be that big. It could probably be even smaller if they really wanted it to. It's kind of just that convenience factor of, there's a lot of people out there who own a Switch and they say, I never undock it. And they feel like they bought a handheld that they never use, and it's kind of like, well, you know, I would have bought a system that just removed that portable element if it was a little cheaper. Like, I would have bought that model, but Nintendo doesn't offer it. And since they've already offered the portable only Switch, is there really any reason they can't offer a stationary Switch piece of hardware? And, you know, no, there's not.
Yeah.
Like, they destroyed the idea of Switch with the Switch Lite.
Right.
You can't switch. So introduce the next natural progression of the system of a docked only Switch. And I think we could see it in 2021 because, as I said, we saw the Switch in 2017, the Lite came out in 2019, and now you can do the Switch Home in 2021, and you cover all areas of needs for the platform. And, you know, as I said, it doesn't have to sell tons of units. It's just to cater to that small market who doesn't want a portable system.
What about the Joy-Cons and stuff? Do you bundle it with a Pro controller? How does that work? Yeah.
Bundle with a Pro controller. And that's the thing. You save yourself on cost. You remove that screen. That's a big part of cost for the Switch itself. Is the screen.
That's
remove
true.
The screen.
Yeah.
Remove the Joy-Cons. bundle in a Pro controller, you could probably get this down to $150.
It doesn't solve my problem, though, that the screens are too small. I want a bigger screen.
Now you have your TV.
Well, that's true. You do have the TV, but then there's the Joy-Con drift issue. I guess with the Pro controller, that eliminates that too, right?
See? Well, I mean, you still have the revision, or you still have the Pro, the hybrid, so you could still have improved Joy-Cons.
Yeah.
Maybe make the screen a little bigger. And then you have to make that tough decision of, what do I buy?
Yeah. I mean,
I want the best of both worlds?
I would buy a docked-only Switch and keep the Lite for the portable stuff, even though I just complained about the screen size. I think it's the best portable iteration of the handheld. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely some merit in that thought process that, you know, they could just bookend the range with a docked only or a dockable only Switch revision. I think that would be kind of cool.
And it kind of fits Nintendo's narrative where they said they want to turn the Switch into like a family of different hardware. So if you do have the Switch Home, Switch Lite, Switch Hybrid, and you cover all the bases of need, you really do create that, you know, that family of systems where no matter how you game, you have an option.
Mm-hmm.
And if Nintendo can position themselves that way with aggressive pricing, you just kind of sit there and you say, hey, we're in a really strong place now. We've already have sold at that point probably 85 million Switch and Switch Lites.
Yeah.
And now you have another available SKU where people will double dip. And, you know, Switch hardware sales just continue to rise. And maybe some people who have been hesitant to buy a Switch for those reasons, they just don't want a portable system, or they just look at it and think it's flimsy, say, well, now I'm going to buy that new Nintendo system. And, you know, that's the market Nintendo hasn't been able to directly address. But now you can. And even with cloud gaming, because it's going to be in your house on Wi-Fi, maybe it has an Ethernet port. Who knows? That's a foreign technology to Nintendo for some reason. All of a sudden, cloud gaming is more viable. I plug in that Ethernet port.
Right.
I don't have to worry about the internet connection being too weak with Wi-Fi. And now games like Control or Resident Evil 7 on cloud become even more viable for the platform. And it bides Nintendo time until they have to release their inevitable successor in the early 2023 range.
Yeah.
So it's...
Bring it on.
Nintendo could have a very interesting year next year.
Yeah, I want to see what they come up with. Hopefully they'll just completely blow people's minds with this stuff, because I think that would be a pretty big announcement if they came out with something like that. I think a lot of people, again, would be questioning, well, what exactly is the Switch anymore? But I think it would be a really cool move if they did that. I'd definitely jump on board with a system like that.
Yeah, I mean, if Nintendo can do the three-prong approach and be successful at it, then we kind of have an idea of how they can approach their next-gen system.
Right.
Maybe like right out of the gate, within the first 18 months, they come out with hybrid Lite home.
Yep.
And it's just like, kind of like what we see with the iPads. Like you have like, what is it?
The iPad mini, the iPad Air, the regular iPad. Yeah, there's the whole suite of different ones you can get.
Yeah, if Nintendo could do that with the Switch, I mean, it would take careful marketing. You have to have aggressive pricing, but you know, the Switch has been so successful in Nintendo, it's not a concept you want to abandon anytime soon. And 2021 just feels like the right time for them to do something like that, because usually every 2 years you see another revision or a new introduction of a model with this platform so far, and you know, bring it on. And that could be a nice way to compete with the current or the next gen systems from Sony and Microsoft by introducing your own system, especially if it has the internals of what we're anticipating with the revision or the Pro, and you have that 4K functionality. You can finally say, hey, Switch 4K.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's see. Come on, Nintendo. Bring it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to next year. It'll be a good one for sure.
Now we have a wide array of Streamlabs questions. And the first one is from Jackie G, who donated $1, who writes, if E3 2021 does go ahead next year, do you see any other major companies dropping out? Love the content as always. Who's left?
I will start by saying I think it's unlikely that E3 2021 will go ahead next year. But if it did, then I would not expect to see Sony at the show. I would not expect to see Nintendo at the show. Microsoft maybe will set up shop across the street at the Staples Center like they normally do, because that's their theater. I don't really expect it to be any different than what we saw in 2019 as far as people, who's going to be there.
Yeah, I'm not really anticipating E3 2021 to be a in-person show. I think they'll go like a virtual event.
Yeah.
Better than the Summer Game Fest. I think they'll have something a little more organized, but
let's hope so.
Yeah, I can't think of any big companies really left to leave E3. I think, as a lot of these companies said, they saw just as much attention during the Summer Game Fest as they saw during E3. So I think a lot of companies realized don't need E3 in the traditional sense anymore.
With that said, though, I do miss E3, and hopefully we'll see its return some point.
Some point, I'm sure we'll see it returned in a new format. We then had a $3 donation from Matthew Hammond, who writes, "Here is a possible way some developers could shame other developers into changing. Have a prominent logo on their games that say crunch. However, this is defined 70 plus, 80 plus, or 90 plus hours a week was not utilized in the development of this game. That certainly would shame developers if they had to put that at the beginning of a game saying, we utilize crunch. Our developers worked 100 hours a week for 3 months. Yeah, you'll never see something like that happen, but it would definitely make developers feel bad.
What I would like to see there is, we hear all the stories about bad crunch stories, but let's talk about the good companies that have a really good work culture and bring them up, and put them in the limelight and shine a light on them. And let's listen to their stories about, how they're doing things and what makes them successful. And hopefully that will, A, educate more people about, the dangers of crunch and working for companies that have a crunch culture. And B, these companies that do have a crunch culture, maybe they will take note of these things and hopefully either come up with some changes that make sense for them, or at the very least, just, make them have a good hard look at themselves and say, look, we really need to figure some things out, and go from there.
Yeah, that would also be a good avenue to explore for the industry.
Absolutely.
We then had a $5 donation from Flame Token, who writes, I was pleasantly surprised by the localization of Fire Emblem 1, but I was more intrigued by the lack of a physical cart for the collector's edition.
Me too.
Do you think we'll see more code-only collector's editions, or was this too small to justify a cart on its own?
We will see more code-only collector's editions that are limited edition in this fashion, because this is something Nintendo has done in the past. If you go back and look at Virtual Console, there has been numerous games that have been limited edition and have never returned. And I think this is just another example of that. Unfortunately, I would like to see a physical, but I don't think it's coming.
Yeah, this definitely wasn't a case of cost or anything. They easily could have thrown this game on a cart. The cart at that size would have been pennies to Nintendo anyways, but it's easier just to do code only, make a big fancy thing. And as MVG was saying, that's really the decision behind such things with these collector's editions. Then a $1 donation from Nexus. Right, I noticed in the PlayStation 5 teardown video that the drive is attached on the outside of the main assembly. Would it be possible to buy an all-digital PlayStation 5 and add a disk drive later by swapping out the shell?
In theory, it would be, but security-wise, it won't work. Everything, at least in previous iterations of Sony hardware, including the Blu-ray drives, is tied to the system via a key, and that key is generally associated with the CPU key, which is not easily extractable. So the answer is, in theory, yeah, you could connect a drive up, but it's probably not going to work, I would say. I think it will just reject any disk that you try to put into it.
Yeah, we need to actually tear down the system ourselves and really see everything in the internals to see if it's possible. But yeah, in theory, you're right, it is possible. Then we had a $1 donation from The Dark Void, who writes, "Hello, gentlemen. I have a strange question. Do you think a portable external SSD hard drive like the Samsung T7 will work for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X or S? Also, what obscure Nintendo IP would you like to see return? I'm rooting for Eternal Darkness or Geist." The portable external SSD, like the Samsung T7, it should work for PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S as a external storage. You won't be able to play your PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series S or X games from it, but you can store your games on it. You would have to transfer them to the system itself if you want to play them. You can play your Xbox One or PlayStation 4 games from it. But yeah, there's no reason for any compatibility issues there.
Agree. And before we move on, Pilot Wings would be my pick, by the way.
Pilot Wings.
I love that franchise.
Ooh, an obscure Nintendo IP. What would I come up with? Oh, man. Ice Climbers.
That's a good one.
Because it's quite obscure. The original game wasn't really that good. And you can make it like... If you could make it like an actual good mountain climbing game where there's like treacherous mountains and rocks.
Yeah,
and
like
stuff.
when you're climbing that big snow-capped mountain in Death Stranding. That was fun.
Yeah.
Just something like that.
I want something like that.
Yeah.
This dark, gritty mountain climbing game with those two, what are they, like husband and wife?
Exactly.
No, he fell off the mountain. Then had a $12 donation from Dan74 saying, "Looking at the Switch games likely coming in 2021 has me excited, but the chance of blowing it all in 1 year seems like a bad strategy. If you could decide what games hold until Switch 2, what would they be? Splatoon 3, Mario Kart 3, Mario, Dragon Quest 12?
I think Mario Kart's definitely one of them. You know, that's kind of the evergreen title out of that one. Splatoon would be another one, I guess, but I don't know about Dragon Quest. I mean, I think, you know, obviously that is a time commitment and a very big one at that, but I think once you beat that game, you'll never even want to think about it ever again. And I think something like Mario Kart just holds that. I'm just going to play one more game, or I'm going to turn the system on and jump online for like 20 minutes and beat some fools playing, you know. So I would say Mario Kart personally.
Yeah, I would hold anything that's like evergreen, like the Mario Kart, Splatoon, Smash Brothers type of stuff, because it is evergreen. They sell for the duration of the system's lifespan. And, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe looks to be the holiday pack-in again for this year. So Nintendo clearly sees value in that game still. Yeah, things like Mario, you can always have more than one Mario game on a system. We've had Mario Galaxy 2. So there's no reason to hold a Mario game back. Yeah, I'd hold back the Splatoons, the Mario Kart, Smash Brothers, those type of games. Then had a $5 donation from Forward Thinking, who writes, "Cyberpunk got me thinking. How do we preserve physical games that have downloadable patches, especially those back from the PS3 and 360 era? Can we download the patch data and merge it with the disk data to create a complete image?"
Yes, but the problem is these games need to be re-signed and recertified, so it makes it impossible to do so. I think the best thing we can hope for is the company to come back and bring out a, what do you call it, like a director's cut version, or a one of the versions that has all the DLC included with all the patches and everything in the future. And a lot of companies like to do that, the complete edition of something. Not everyone is doing that, but hopefully we'll see more of those come out.
Then had a $1 donation from Skittles, who writes, "With today's news of game streaming coming to Switch, let me propose to you Game Pass for Switch. To not cannibalize sales of games on Switch, it would focus more on Microsoft's first-party games. Could you see the service as a viable addition to Ultimate?" Yes, it would be a viable addition to Ultimate, but Nintendo still doesn't seem willing to play ball with Microsoft.
Doesn't seem like it. And I think Microsoft right now obviously have their hands full with the Bethesda acquisition, so I don't know if the timing is still right at the moment for this, but hopefully, this discussion is still on the table and we'll see more of it at some point.
I mean, if it is a case of Microsoft saying we're only going to bring our first-party games to the Switch via Game Pass on cloud for Switch, maybe Nintendo could have a little more control over which games get approved on that type of application. So, because they wouldn't have those games anyways, but Nintendo still might say, if you can natively port a game, we'll use Ori as the example, then do the native port. Don't do the cloud version. If you want to do a cloud version of Starfield for the Switch, we'll be more than willing to take it. But, there's so many factors when these deliberations are taking place, and those are always the holdup, is the finer details. But as we said, I'm sure they are having these conversations. Microsoft and Nintendo are close. They both seem to want to work together for this industry. And maybe one day we do see something like just Microsoft first-party games come to Switch via the cloud. It's certainly something I think a lot of people with a Switch would love to see happen. So, we will see how it plays out in the months and years to come. And that is the final Streamlabs question. As always, if you donate $1 or any amount you'd like, ask us a question and we will answer at the end of the episode. If you donate $100 or more, we will dedicate the episode to you. Today's episode was dedicated to Shamsa. As always, thank you for your generosity. And I'd like to thank MVG for joining me as always.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It was a fun discussion tonight.
It was a fun discussion, and be sure to check MVG's channel, which is linked in the description below, so you can see the Xbox Series S unboxing and see the cute little Snoopy Dog system that it is. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, let us know your thoughts in the comment section below, and until next time, embrace the hate.